Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time you are tuning in. Welcome to Homesteading and Gardening in the Suburbs. I'm Emma from Misfit Gardening, and today I want to be giving you guys a little bit of training about some easy seed saving tools that you might already have laying around, because with spring definitely here, even though as I'm looking outside I can see snow on the mountains here along the Wasatch Front. Living at an altitude does have some challenges, but for a lot of you, seed saving is starting to come to the front of your mind. There's lots of plants that are producing very well, especially for those of you in the southern states. So now's a perfect time to start thinking a little bit about seed saving. And I know that one of the challenges new seed savers often face is thinking that you need to invest in a bunch of stuff to save seeds from the garden, when in fact you can use things that you probably already have kicking about at home, and that's what I want to talk about today. So before I kind of get into it a little bit, I want to kind of talk about some of the reasons why we need to save seed. And I know that if you are a regular listener, you will probably have heard some of the other episodes that I have done about seed saving. But some of the main reasons that come up are saving money, preserving diversity, seed security, having a consistent quality of seeds, and also adapted plants. And I just want to kind of read to you a quote that was on a cup of tea that I had at work the other day. And it just kind of really inspired me to help do this episode. And it said, "All the flowers of all the tomorrows are in the seeds of today." And that was just kind of beautiful, the way that it summed up sort of how I felt about seeds and why I want to encourage you, as you're listening, to think about saving seeds. So let's talk a little bit about why save some seeds, okay? Because there's lots of different reasons, but I just want to talk about some of the main ones. So saving money, preserving diversity, having seed security and consistent quality of seeds, and adapted plants. So seed saving, helps save money, right? It really helps to reduce the cost of gardening. Seed packets are incredibly expensive now, and buying them every year can make your garden a pricey hobby, right? Saving seeds means that you don't have to keep buying them anymore. And saving seeds also means that you can preserve a historical or an heirloom variety, or just save seeds from a variety that is growing in the garden. It's the diversity of plants that brings strength to our gardens, right? We're more likely to get a harvest from something if we grow different varieties and lots of vegetables, herbs, flowers, and fruits than we are of just one single thing or a monocrop in the garden. Over the years, hundreds of wonderful plant varieties have been discontinued as the seed industry has changed. So if you were to save your own seed, right, this is where seed security comes in, right, you're controlling the supply, and you can be assured that your favorite variety is not going to be discontinued. I can't tell you the number of times that I've looked in a catalogue and I am kicking myself, a few years later. I was like, I wish I'd bought that variety. I wish I'd gotten it, because they no longer, carry that seed. And, there's various reasons why a company is not going to, keep that seed. Primarily, probably, is because it wasn't selling. Like, gardeners were not interested in it, and it wasn't profitable for the business to keep maintaining it, so they discontinued it. Saving seed, however, really is freedom to grow and actively create your future and the future of those that you love. Let's talk about consistent quality next, because I'm really meaning that you can select plants that you're saving seeds from, and you can control how the seeds are stored, how they're kept, and how they're shared locally, right? I can't tell you how many times I grow seeds from a packet and they've either got really rubbish germination, right? They're really not very good. Maybe they weren't stored right during shipping, for example, or, I've run into problems where I sow the seed and something I wasn't expecting grew, like a totally different tomato than what was on the packet. Or I once grew a row of broccoli and a turnip sprouted up in the middle of the row. So I know it wasn't like a seed that I'd accidentally planted in there. A turnip seed was mixed up in the packet, and that probably happened, during, the filling of the packet, right? The machinery that's used to do that probably wasn't cleaned out beforehand, and broccoli and turnip seeds look very, very similar, but when you're saving your own seeds and you're kind of keeping them together, you're labeling them, you're saving them, like you're really starting to control that quality that you're seeing, and you're also saving seed from plants that you really like. You're doing some level of selection. So maybe you're growing and saving seeds from, the biggest varieties. I don't know, let's say the bigger tomatoes that are growing on your plant, or the bean pods that have like more seeds per pod, right? You're making those choices and you're selecting those plants based on things that you want to see in your garden, which is kind of the exciting thing for seed saving for me. And lastly, adapted plants. So I'm talking about those plants that have adapted to your garden and to your region. That first time that you grow a plant, the genetics to help it grow in your garden are there, and they're passed to the seeds. And each time you save and grow those seeds and grow them out again and save the seeds again, your plants are becoming more and more adapted and stronger, and they're growing to your garden and how you as a gardener grow, right? This is how landrace seeds start to be developed. And if you want to know more about landrace seeds, then definitely check out the previous episode that I did all about landrace seeds, because I think there's so much potential there, even as a home gardener, to be creating your own varieties and having things that grow well in your area and in your region. And every time that you're buying seeds to grow, you're basically starting back at the beginning. And who really knows where your seeds in the packet were grown? Sure, the company that you're buying them from might be from Oregon, or they might be from California, or they might be from Virginia, but the seeds that they're growing might be coming from Iowa, or they might be coming from Illinois, or they might be coming from Maine. They're coming from different regions. Now, so some areas have like local co-ops and collectives where they're kind of partnering and growing locally, but a lot of them are not. And, there's even kind of talks along the seed community about seeds being grown outside of the US and being sold into US consumers. So there's a lot of things that are kind of happening within the seed industry. And you can avoid all of that really by saving seeds out of your garden. So let's talk about the tools, okay? Now, the first thing that you're going to need when it comes to harvesting seeds is a good pair of cutting tools, right? We want things to dry off in the garden as much as possible when we're planning on harvesting our seeds, and we're going to need some tools to help harvest those dry seeds. So it's really important to have a good pair of scissors and a good pair of hand pruners, right? A steady pair of kitchen scissors. They're great for cutting off small delicate stems of flowers, things like calendula, aka pot marigolds, zinnias, marigolds, as well as harvesting seeds from herbs like chive, basil, and lavender, right? Pair of scissors, great. However, your scissors are not going to help with tougher stems. So this is where your trusty pair of secateurs or hand pruners are going to come in, right? Because they're going to be able to cut, these tough dried stems that are full of seeds, right? So I use hand pruners all the time for big stems like rhubarb and Swiss chard, beets, winter squash. Oh my goodness, yeah, I could not, a knife sometimes comes in handy for winter squash, trying to cut the fruit from the vine. But things like, spinach, and even tough stems like kale and cabbage and broccoli and other brassicas, when they start to seed and then they dry out, my goodness, those things get like tougher than old boots to try and cut. And there's even varieties of kale that were used as walking sticks. They're that tough. So you need a really good pair of hand pruners, okay? And most gardeners have got these tools around in the garden, although as I look outside today after it's been raining, I saw that I left my hand pruners and secateurs outside. So I'm going to have to really clean them up and give them a good dose of oil to help bring them back up. So don't make the mistake that I did, guys. Put your tools back after you've finished with them. Let's talk a little bit about labeling because it's a good thing to keep in mind as we start on our seed saving journey, that you want to make sure you've got the tools for labeling, because a lot of seeds often look very similar. So you want to make sure that you've got things like permanent markers, pens, pencils, all that sort of stuff, and something to write on so you can keep track of which variety is which, right? And even with seed packets, right, as you've been kind of putting seeds into your hands, have you really noticed how alike some of them are? And I talked earlier about the broccoli and the turnip. Well, all of the brassicas really, so kale, mustard, broccoli, cabbage, tatsoi, bok choy, all of those, they all look really, really, really alike. And if you do not label your containers, you're not going to know what you have in terms of the actual plant, let alone the variety. And I mean, I'm getting older now and my memory ain't quite there what it was when I was in my early 20s, but even so, I would not remember all the varieties that I had. So it's really, really important to label. I really like permanent markers, and I really like masking tape actually, because it's really easy to see, but there's other ways to label stuff. So like masking tape on a jar or on a bag, or whatever I've got the seeds in. It's easy to kind of do, and you're not kind of running around trying to find where all your labels and stuff are. And I don't like to label lids of things because I kind of got into the habit of that when I worked in the OTC industry. You always labeled the jar, not the lid, because lids can get mixed up. So I always like to label the jar. So I was taught quality early in my career, and I like to stick to it now. So let's talk about letting your plants dry out, because that's really what we want when we're saving seeds. We want the plants to flower, we want them to produce the seeds, and we want to let the seeds really dry outside, because that's where the plants are going to fully develop in the garden, because the plant's still growing. As those seeds are maturing, like the last bit of the life is kind of going out into those seeds to help propagate a new generation. And we can't always let the seeds dry outside. I mean, those of you that are living at altitude, or you have a really short growing season, you guys may know that sometimes frosts are coming, and they're coming a lot sooner than you expected. Maybe you've got a really small garden. You need to make space for something else to grow in there. And there's a number of reasons that, we can't let seeds dry out in the space that we're letting them grow. But don't be disheartened. And I've got a little nifty trick to help with this. And my trick is, if your plant is about 50% or more of the fruits and the seeds, then you can pull up the whole plant, roots and all, like pull the whole thing up. And you can bring it inside. You want to brush off a little bit of the soil, so it's not like dropping all over the house, right? But brush off some of that soil and bring that whole plant in. And then you want to turn it upside down and hang it somewhere in a cool, dry area, and the seeds are going to mature. The plant is going to be pushing that last bit of its energy into those seeds, and they will mature, right? And this is a really, really cool trick. There was a lady that I got some seeds from through the Seed Savers Exchange, and she was growing at an altitude too. She was out in Colorado, and she'd given some seeds to a lady who was growing at like some crazy amount of feet above sea level. I want to say it was like 9,000 feet above sea level. It was pretty high. And that was exactly how she was able to save seeds each year. Was she was pulling up that whole plant, even the roots, even for things, like beans, and she was bringing it all inside, letting them dry, and she was still getting viable seed to grow and use the next year. So that's a really cool little trick. And like I said, you can use it for, if you've got a small garden and you're wanting to get more plants in to grow for food, right? That's why we're all here. We want to grow a garden that is producing food for us and our families. So there's a lot of plants that do well with this pull-up method, right? Drying beans, runner beans, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, mustard, kale, marigold, and arash or mountain spinach. These are the plants I've personally had success with, right? Pulling these up and curing them inside. And, I live at an altitude too, and, seasons and weather can fluctuate quickly. And this method really is a great way to get a seed harvest of adapted plants without losing them to frosts, because once that frost comes in, your seed viability can be hit and miss. But there's lots of other plants that this works for too. And you can hang the plants on a nail or on a hook or something, kind of like if you're kind of curing garlic or onions and stuff inside, somewhere cool and dry, or you can just kind of prop them up into a container so things aren't going to be dropping everywhere. So I've got these like big plastic flexible trug things, and sometimes I'll just kind of upend the seeds into a trug because the seeds do kind of fall out the plant at some point, and at least there's a way to capture them so they're not going all over the floor. Buckets work great, like 5-gallon buckets, if you can get your hands on some of those. Maybe you've been buying things in bulk, or you've got a serious paint project coming up, right? 5-gallon buckets, myriad of uses on a homestead, including making a worm farm, which I am still working on. I'm still working on worm farming, folks. And for those of you that don't know, I have had a lot of trouble with worm farming over the last 5 years that I have been kind of homesteading here in the suburbs. I've not quite managed it, but I've seen people have like really great success with worms, and especially on YouTube, there's some really great, urban kind of worm farming and worm composting things on there. I've just not quite figured out the tricks yet, but I will soon. Perseverance, that's the mark of a good homesteader, is keep trying. Anyway, back to seed saving. I really like trugs and buckets, right? And the reason is I can cut the seed heads off those plants after they're dry, and then I can thresh the seeds, so I can bash those seed heads around in the trug or in the bucket, and it knocks those seeds out of the pods. And that's basically what threshing is. It's where we want to remove the seeds from the husks or the pods and other parts of the plants. And the other thing with trugs and buckets and stuff is you can use them to pull in stuff as you're harvesting it out the garden as well, just not with the seeds in it at the same time. All right. Now, I use a myriad of weird and wonderful tools for harvesting and drying seeds. And one of my favorites are paper grocery bags. Yep, you heard me right. Paper grocery bags. Seed heads, right? We do the same thing. So after they're kind of drying out, I kind of chop the roots and stuff off, and I just kind of stick them into the paper bag. And they keep drying out in the basement because it's cool and it's dry. And the great thing about the paper bags is it's not kind of keeping moisture in the bag. So if I used a plastic bag, like the moisture can't escape, whereas in a paper bag it can. And all of these kind of seeds are able to dry out, and I use this for so many different plants. I'll use it for oh goodness, I've used it for salsify, scorzonera, obviously kale. I've been working on a lot of kale projects over the last couple of years. I've been trying to save seed from kales that overwinter without any protection, even in the snow here in Utah, so I can have a really solid kale that'll grow outside without any protection. So I have a lot of kale seeds kicking about, but also, it's really good for, other kind of bigger seeds or things that have got like a lot of stem, like lettuce. And, they're easy to use because once you've got your seeds dried out, you can just pull them out of that paper grocery bag, spread them on an old bed sheet or a tarp, and then you can walk on them to remove the seeds from the pods, or you can, go back to the bucket in the truck and beat them around so the seeds fall out. The other thing that I like about paper grocery bags is they're recyclable, they're compostable, and you can even use them as a sheet mulch in the garden to block weeds. So I really love paper grocery bags for so many reasons. Some other tools that I use to save seed, and you can too, are same as the grocery bag but on a smaller scale, is brown paper sandwich bags. These are great for putting seed heads. If you're out in the garden and you happen to notice, let's say dill, the dill head has started forming seeds, you can just, pop your brown paper sandwich bag over the plant, turn it upside down and, snip that whole head off the plant, and then just let it dry in that brown paper sandwich bag. I love going around the garden with paper sandwich bags, and I'm just kind of chopping off like heads that are almost fully dry into the bags, and then you can just write on the paper bag what it is and the year. If you remember the variety, put the variety down, but yeah, you can just kind of put them in there and then leave them in those for a couple of weeks to dry out. Other things that I like to use, paper towels or kitchen paper. This is really good for wet seeds, so things like tomatoes, cucumber, or even squash, especially if you don't have the time to ferment and wet process the seeds. And if the seeds are just going to be for you to grow, does it really matter if they're fermented and stuff? Not necessarily. I've had great germination doing this. I've got, bits of paper towel that have got tomato seeds smeared all over them, and that's literally what you do. You just scoop out those wet seeds and you just smear them across the paper towel, like right on the paper towel what the plant is and the variety, and just let them dry out on there. And to plant them again, you just kind of peel them off the kitchen paper, or you can kind of tear off a little square and just plant that. In the UK, I've seen people do it on toilet paper, although you probably don't want that like really thin toilet paper because it's just going to disintegrate. But that was kind of how some of the old timers were growing stuff in the allotments, was just using seeds that they were pulling off on a bit of toilet paper or kitchen paper. Just a little tip there. Another great seed-saving tool are coffee filters. These are really great for drying. You can write directly on the filter, and you can just kind of spread your seeds out on the coffee filter, and they're going to let your seeds dry out. One downside of coffee filters is that they can easily be knocked over, scattering your seeds all over. So put them somewhere where they are not going to get knocked over. Like just walking past them can sometimes knock them over, and definitely don't put them somewhere where a fan is. And then you find that your coffee filters have fluttered all over the room, and your seeds are now scattered all over the house, and you have no idea what they are. Don't ask me how I know this. All right, let's talk about some other slightly sturdier tools than a coffee filter, and that is aluminium pie dishes and paper plates. So they make a really good way to hold bigger seeds. I use these kind of things for things like fava beans or broad beans because I really want them to be super dry before they go into storage. And old plates or bowls, they, ones that you can pick up at the thrift store, those come in really handy for drying seeds too. They're also harder to knock over or move than a coffee filter. And, you can do the same thing. You could put a little bit of masking tape, on the container so you know what it is. And you're not going to be forgetting, whereas you can write directly on the coffee filter. And I use all of these tools for seed saving. Actually, I'm pretty sure I drive my husband nuts because he's like, what's in this container? Is it garbage? I'm like, no, it's my seeds. Just leave my seeds alone. It's good to label your seeds and maybe let other people in your household know, hey, don't throw these away. These aren't garbage. They're my seeds. Let's talk a bit about seed storage because you really want to take care of your seeds, and you will find as you are saving seed and growing it from your garden, you are going to be having better germination than what you are from seeds that you have bought. And you want to be keeping seeds dry and cool, because there's three things that affect how long your seeds are going to last for, and that's air, moisture, and temperature. So air is like the amount of oxygen and stuff that they're getting, because seeds are living. They are living organisms and they do die off. So their viability and their ability to germinate and grow does start to die off. In fact, there's a university here in the US, and I can't for the life of me remember which one it is, but they've been doing this study for almost 100 years of seeds that have been buried on the campus grounds, and they're every year or every 20 years, 10 to 20 years, they're like pulling out seeds and doing germination tests on them and seeing if they're growing. So seeds are remarkably resilient, but they do need certain things to be somewhat controlled for the best germination rate. Because if you think about what does a seed need to grow, it's warmth, it's water, and it's air. So we want to do the opposite to store our seeds. And that's why things like plastic bags or plastic containers are really only temporary storage for seeds, because they let air and moisture in. I know it doesn't look like they do, but they do over time. Now, I want to, let you know that there are other uses for mason jars on the homestead than canning. And I know so many gardeners and homesteaders have mason jars kicking about because, canning season is coming, and it's going to be coming around, August, so 3 months from now? It's not far away. But they make such great seed storage containers too. They keep the air and the moisture out. That's how they preserve the food that we're canning. And the other great thing is pests can't get into them if you're storing seeds in like a shed or a crawl space or something like that. Now, if you don't have any mason jars, no problem. Start saving food jars with metal lids from the grocery store. Use them for condiments. Or use the ones from condiments, right? Clean out and dry your jars thoroughly, but you can totally reuse old jars for seed saving. And actually, this is how most of my seeds are stored. Oh my goodness, I can't talk this morning. But this is really how most of my seeds are stored. They're in old glass jars that I've saved from sauces, condiments, pickles. Because my mason jars are full of food that I've preserved. And, last year was kind of crazy getting hold of mason jars and lids and stuff. But, bigger containers obviously hold more seeds. So, if you're saving bigger seeds like beans and stuff, then maybe you want bigger jars. And if you've got smaller seeds, then, use the smaller jars. You could ask friends or family for, jars and the lids, right? Just run them through the dishwasher to give them a good clean and then let them thoroughly dry, right? It's really important that they're dry. I really like the metal lids because they hold up better and they actually let in less air and moisture than those plastic lids. I keep my seeds in the coolest part of my basement, and I just grab the jars of the plants that I want to start growing, pop them in a basket because I'm kind of obsessed with baskets on the homestead, and I just take the jars out to where I want to start growing and, just start sowing the seeds straight from the jar. But it's really important that your seeds are thoroughly dry before you put them into the jar. Some people put little silica desiccants in with the jars. I haven't. I just kind of let them kind of stay in those paper bags a little bit longer to make sure that they're super dry before I go ahead and put them in the jar. Now, there's a couple of tips to succeed when it comes to seed saving on your homestead. And the first is really keep it simple, right? Label your plants with the variety, when you're harvesting and curing your seeds so you know what they are and you don't get them muddled up. And use what you have for drying and collecting seeds. You really don't need super fancy equipment. I really like to use a tracker or keep a record of what I'm doing because, when things start to get going in the garden and canning season shows up, right, things can get really busy. And having a tracker or using your journal, right, your gardening journal to kind of keep some seed saving notes really kind of helps. Label your jars. I don't know if I mentioned labeling yet. Labeling might be important. And I really want to ring that home for you. But there's so many wonderful resources thanks to the digital age that we're all living in. Reach out if you get stuck, right? Gardeners are really a friendly, helpful bunch who really want to help others succeed in growing their own food and seed saving for future. So if in doubt, reach out. And with that, I hope that you found this training super helpful. Let me know in the Facebook group, what is it that you are going to be seed saving this year? I love to hear about your gardens and what it is that's growing and what you're going to be saving from your garden and on your homestead this year. So let me know. Until next time, I hope your garden is growing beautifully and I will see you all next week.